Hello and welcome to another episode of SkaredCast. This is Skari, your grateful host, and this is episode 71 of the podcast, your hub for the tabletop experience. Of course, we've got a couple of things to see today, and make sure you check out all the other media that we do, the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, and the blog site. But of course, not before you've listened to this week's episode. And we begin. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is Skari. Okay, let's get this party started. So, first thing I want to talk about, of course, is the warlord trait for the Inquisition book. Now, of course, the new Inquisition supplement was released a couple of weeks ago, and it has been shaking up the meta everywhere, and I say that out of personal experience, considering I actually run Kotias with Vect now, which is awesome. And the book itself came with its own set of warlord traits for the game. So now this is a very unique set of warlord traits in a specific way, a specific reason. There are three different forms of inquisitors that are kind of explored in the Inquisition book. You have the Ordo Xenos, which are the Xenos Inquisitors, which are mainly tasked with the duty of finding the Xenos and purging the Xenos. So like the aliens, so you're looking at anti-orcs or anti-Eldar or whatever it is that they would usually do. And then you have the Ordo Hereticus, which is mainly tasked with dealing with the heretics, so those who have fallen from the Emperor's light, mainly human or, you know, space marine, evil space marines that have fallen. And then you have the Ordo Maleus, which is basically the demon hunters, and they are tasked with finding and destroying creatures from the warp. So, of course, each of these has a different way of playing, and fluff-wise they have different kind of ways of interacting with the rules, and different war gear that they can kind of pick and whatnot. And you know, it's no different that they will be running different warlord traits. Now, these are really interesting. I like the way they did it. It's the first kind of multi-integrated warlord trait. So instead of having like three like fully different warlord traits, because yes, they are very similar in the sense that they're all inquisitors, but they do differ in the sense that, you know, each inquisitor will kind of vary a little bit from depending on kind of what task they have. The warlord trait actually has well, covers all three, but the three basic roles, like a 1, 2, 3, are shared by all three of the Xenos. So the, you know, if you roll a 1, or if you roll a 2, or if you roll a 3, no matter what kind of inquisitor you are, you will have the same warlord trait. Now, the reason this is relevant is no matter what army you're playing, you can actually task the inquisitor as being the warlord for that game, which, you know, if you're playing like Space Marines and you have like a chapter master, you can, instead of getting the chapter master of your primary detachment to be the warlord, you can actually task the inquisitor of the inquisitorial detachment to be a warlord. which, yes, leads to some confusion, because you can be like, well, who's really what, and what's going on, and you don't really fully understand it, and that's completely understandable, because most people would get confused by stuff like that. I get confused by half the stuff that GW is doing nowadays. But it actually is kind of cool. Well, you know, in the fluff, you always have Inquisitors who come in and basically take over an entire planetary defense force, and go on like a personal vendetta or something, and they really just want to, you know, and I really like that that's kind of reflected by the rules in the Inquisitorial book, the warlord traits in the Inquisitorial book, and whatnot. So that's the introduction. So let's dive into these warlord traits. Of course, I always give each specific, I kind of gauge each specific warlord trait with a kind of utility, and kind of build it in towards, or kind of explain it in regards to within a list, and kind of what utility I see from it if you're playing said army. And then of course at the end I will rate each individual warlord trait tree. I'm going to call them the warlord trait trees, because it's actually like a, you know, they're kind of different in their own right, in terms to the whole. I think the highest warlord trait results we've had have been the command warlord trait, just from the basic 40k rulebook, and the Yandin warlord trait table from the Yandin Eldar supplement. So let's get started, shall we? And if you have any comments or suggestions, or you'd like me to talk about anything specific, please let me know. I'm always up to you know, getting some more feedback and really learning more about the game itself, but also about what you guys would like to actually hear me talk about. So make sure you drop me a line on my email at scared.podbean.com, or go to the Facebook page at Facebook/SkaredCast to drop me a line there. You know, send me a message on iTunes, or leave a comment on the main blog site. Really appreciate your feedback if you have some to give me. Okay, so number one. This is, of course, one of the ones that is cross-traded with any Inquisitor. So all three Inquisitor types can roll a 1, a 2, or a 3. So they all might roll a 1 and show unquestionable wisdom. The warlord and his units can choose to pass or fail any morale check. I like that one. That one's a nice one. It's useful, especially if you're running in a, say, something that has Battle Brothers, and you're running, you know, a huge blob squad of Imperial Guardsmen with an allied Space Marine captain or librarian or rune priest to give the huge blob squad, and they shall know no fear, which is great because then they can auto rally and never get run down. But then you combine that with this warlord trait, and all of a sudden you have a huge blob squad that, if you shoot at in the shooting phase, could just choose to just fall back and then rally and then come back at you and rapid fire with first round, second round fire. First rank, second round fire, or, you know, can choose to hold and force you to charge them, or in combat can choose to try and flee if they don't want to be locked in combat, if they lose combat, so they can shoot at you. It adds a lot of versatility. Now, if you're running with like some fearless units or whatever it is, or if just like you're just running him in like an acolyte unit, unless it's like a close combat acolyte unit, or, you know, if you just don't want to get tied up or something, it can be very useful. Never underestimate the ability to just fail a morale check when you want to. You know, Marinius Calgar is one who has that power on a regular basis for like himself and his squad, I believe. He used to give it to the entire army. and it's a really strong trait to have, because like it's so hard to tie them down, and it really makes people think twice about wanting to say shoot at them in a situation where, you know, sometimes it would be a no-brainer to shoot at them. So out of utility, I think this is one of the bigger ones, and the fact that all three types of Inquisitors can have this, you know, shows that it's actually something that is quite useful. So I like it. Then we also have, if you roll a 2, the Inquisitor is a reader of the Tarot. The Emperor's Tarot being, I believe, like basically a card thing, like a card tarot, and they try and divinate what's going on by reading cards before, say, a battle or something. And this means that the warlord, well, that while the warlord is alive, so while the Inquisitor is alive, the player can roll 2d6 for reserves, outflank, mysterious terrain, mysterious objectives, and can actually pick the one they want. Now this can actually be quite handy, especially if you're playing with mysterious objectives. If you're, say, playing against a flyer-heavy army or something, being able to just, you know, roll 2 dice and have that much of a better chance of, you know, activating a Skyfire Nexus or something, or if you have like a bunch of troops with like long-range bolter fire or something along those lines, being able to get them a targeting relay so they can actually, you know, re-roll ones when shooting, and like the options that this gives you are actually quite handy. Not a lot of people play with, say, mysterious terrain, but if you did play with mysterious terrain, being able to make sure that, you know, the terrain would be less likely to eat you would always be a good thing, especially if you're looking at, you know, like carnivorous forests or whatever it is that sometimes you can run into when you're playing with mysterious terrain. Personally, I have to admit, I haven't ever played with mysterious terrain yet, and you know, if anybody has been playing with the mysterious terrain rules, you know, please shoot me a message. I'd really like to know what you think. See, a lot of the times, like I play a lot of competitive games, and usually tournaments shy away from things like mysterious terrain simply because it just slows down the game, having to kind of figure out one thing or figure out another, or, you know, what does this forest do and what does that forest do, and honestly it just kind of bogs it down. And I know we saw that in fantasy too, when we were doing fantasy tournaments and whatnot, that the fantasy events would rarely actually use things like the mysterious terrain, because of the fact that, you know, it kind of slow everything down and hamper some people and really help some other people. Anyway, so moving on to something else, having that control, especially for things like your reserves and your outflanks and all this stuff, like, can really help you from a tactical perspective, which is great. Then you have if you roll a 3, your warlord becomes a burner of worlds, and he has basically, that's an orbital bombardment. So he has, like, you know, a strike cruiser up in orbit that he has under his command, and he can order it to fire down a basically orbital bombardment. So it's a infinite range, strength 10, AP 1, ordnance like barrage, large blast that just comes down and shoots you in the face, and that's what he does. And it's kind of like a chapter master. Now, because it is ordnance, if you're not wearing something like Terminator armor, it could be potentially hamper, like, you know, you moving or anything like that. So make sure that if you can pick a warlord trait and you go for this, make sure you can shoot it while he's on the move, so he doesn't have to stay still. And if you get it when he does, well, you know, maybe it's something to like stay still turn 1 and just blast away at the enemy to try and force them to spread out or something like that. That would actually be kind of handy. So it is useful. It's not a non-useful power, but it's definitely one that, you know, we have seen on other things that come stock standard with like a Space Marine or something like that. So, you know, it's not going to like catch people off guard or anything. And then those are the 3 main ones that all Inquisitors can be affected by. So whether you're an Inquisitor from the Xenos, an Inquisitor from the Maleos, or an Inquisitor from the Hereticus disciplines. And then it's where it branches off. So now it gets interesting. So I'm going to do each one in its turn. We're going to start with the Ordo Xenos. These guys don't like orcs or Dark Eldar or Eldar or any sort of non-human stuff at all, really. They're the ones that go around and even think like, well, radical ones actually like using things like Xenos artifacts and stuff, and then you have the Puritan ones, which, you know, that's a whole thing if we start talking about lore and whatnot of the Inquisition and whatnot. Although this segment is not on the lore of the different inquisitorial traits, but an Ordo Xenos Inquisitor who rolls a 4 is a Xenos Hunter, and the warlord and his units gain preferred enemy psyker against any non-vehicle unit that is like an Eldar, Dark Eldar, Orc, Necron, a Space Marine, a Tau or Tyranid, in a Tau Tyranid army. So basically any Xenos, if they have any sort of psyker in their army, you don't like them too much and become preferred enemy against them, which makes sense. So utility, not too useful, very kind of specific, and anything that's very, very specific in this game could sometimes be hampering because of the amount of different options and variables that can be found. But nothing to be, but you know, better than nothing. So I think it's a good idea to keep it in mind when you're playing, like when you know you're going to be playing your buddy who has lots of Eldar or something like that. If your Ordo Xenos Inquisitor rolls a 5, he is a Xenotech collector, as I was talking about. He likes using technology that is usually Xenos related, which means he gains a 6+ Infernal save if you didn't have one already. So it's kind of useless if you, say, got him like Terminator armor or something like that. But he also, one of his ranged weapons gains +1 strength and becomes rending, as he's got some like crazy alien technology that'll help him out with it. Now, that's kind of cool. Say you give your Xenos Inquisitor a Stormbolter. Now it's a strength 5 rending Stormbolter. I think that's really cool. I think that's awesome. That really adds a lot of flavor to like a little ranged character. Like it's nothing to like write home about really, but you know what? That's kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of like that one, especially if you're playing like a smaller style like game or whatever, and something as small as a strength 5 bolter can really change the game in a smaller game. I kind of like it. It's very like kill teamy style. So if you have an Inquisitor that goes around and, you know, likes to hide and collect artifacts from Xenos races, it's a very fluffy little option. Not necessarily super tactical, but, you know, interesting. I like it. If your Xenos Inquisitor rolls a 6, he believes in the purity, or she believes in the purity of mankind, which means that the warlord and his or her unit will gain hatred. So re-rolling misses in the first round of combat. Oh, yeah, re-rolling misses. Which is pretty cool. It's awesome. I like that one. That was not bad, especially because one of the coolest Inquisitorial units you can have is like a Death Cult Assassin and Crusader unit, like a close combat unit, and being able to have something that'll increase the close combat capability of said unit is always really handy. Now, it is 1 in 6 chance, but if you can pick and you want to take something like this and you know that you're going to be taking like a Crusader unit in like a Land Raider or something, so you can kind of get the jump on people and like destroy them, then this would actually be kind of handy. It's kind of like having a chaplain in the unit without needing to have a chaplain. So keep that in mind when you're building your forces. Okie dokie. So now we're moving on to the Ordo Maleus, which are the Demon Hunters. So if your Ordo Maleus Inquisitor rolls a 4 on the Warlord trait table, he is a Demon Hunter. And him and his unit gain preferred enemy demons. Well, kind of seeing a trend here. It's very similar but very different to what the preferred enemy Psyker was for the Ordo Xenos. So yeah, just pretty much what it says. If you are playing against demons, very useful. Just like any Maleus Inquisitor should be when fighting against demons. But pretty useless when fighting against anything that isn't a demon. Now, of course, there are some things that are considered demons that are not in the demon book. So you're looking at things like, you know, mandrakes that nobody uses, or the Avatar, or you know, the demon engines from the Chaos Space Marine book. You're looking at, you know, the Forge Fiend and the Mauler Fiend, any of the possessed units, a Helldrake. So it's not like completely useless, as other people do use that sort of unit, but it's not exactly something to write home about, as it is something that is relatively specific to the book in question. So, if you roll a 5 on your Ordo Maleus Inquisitor, he is incorruptible. And all demons within 12 inches suffer a -1 to their invulnerable save. Which is really, really cool. I'm not gonna lie, that is awesome. Very, very specific to, like, against demons only, once again. But phenomenal. Like, it does say that it's to a minimum of 6+ survival, but still. Demons usually only have a 5+ invul, and that is just awesome. And it is cumulative with other modifiers. So, you know, say the Warpstorm table goes awry and you're within, you know, they're -1 to their, you know, invulnerable save, and you have -1 to their invulnerable save. That's pretty cool. Poor demons, you're just going to start banishing them like crazy. But if you're not playing demons, completely useless, once again. And last but not least, if your Maleus Inquisitor rolls a 6, he knows the forbidden lore. And if he's a Psyker, he basically gains an extra warp charge point, so you can use more difficult powers to use, like warp charge 2 powers and whatnot. And if he is not, then he gains Adamantium Will, which basically helps him against Psykers. So either way, I think that is one of the more useful ones, depending on whether or not he is a Psyker or not. It's still useful. And Adamantium Will does transfer over to, say, the Warlord and his unit, so that's always a good one to have. And last but not least, we have the Ordo Hereticus, which is, of course, deals with the traitors and whatnot of humankind. and you know, they're traitors and heretics. So if your Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor rolls a 4, you gain preferred enemy Psycho. Okay, great. Same thing as like the Ordo Xenos, except a little bit more broad. So you can actually do it against like Space Marines and whatnot, because of course they like blaming everybody as heretics, because nobody expects the Inquisition, so they can go around just claiming that people are heretics, and that's actually a little bit more useful than the other one. Okay, good. If you roll a 5, your Inquisitor has Will of Iron and gains Adamantium Will. So we saw that in the Meleus one. So bonus to deny the witch rolls, which, you know, makes sense. And if you roll a 6, your Ordo Hereticus is a Master of Interrogation. So enemy infiltrators may not set up within 24 inches of your warlord, as though he knows they're coming, because he extracted a confession from said heretic who gave away their plans. So all in all, you know, a little bit, it's not like it's still useful, and it's still pretty got like it's ups and downs, considering you need to be able to, or your enemy needs to have infiltrators in the first place in order to be able to use it. But you know, not being able to put infiltrators within 24 inches, you know what, you could just as easily just take some servo skulls. So it's not like the be-all end-all warlord trait, to be absolutely honest. So that is those are the 3 branches of the Inquisitor Codex Warlord Trait Table. And I'm going to give, as an overall Warlord Trait Table, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Right? Why? Because some are useful, some are not. They're not really, like, completely useless, but there's a lot of stuff that's very dependent on whether or not you're playing a specific kind of army or enemy force, which means that it's not always going to be useful. And just that alone means that, you know, by being that specific, you're never going to really be able to get the most out of every single trait, and you might as well be better off rolling on like the command trait on the regular warlord, the regular book. On another note, out of all 3 of them, my favorite is going to have to be the regular ones, the 3 basic ones that you can roll, so 1, 2, and 3, and the ones from the Ordo Hereticus, because I feel that they're the ones that will be the most useful on a more regular basis, instead of the ones from the Ordo Maleus or the Ordo Xenos. I feel that the Ordo Hereticus has ones that are a little bit more akin to different dynamics within the game, and of course the 3 basic ones that you can already get on any of the Inquisitors that you take. Well, that's all I have on the Warlord Trait Table. We've gone on the Inquisition Warlord Traits. So, what do you think? Let me know. I'd like to hear it. Send me an email, leave a comment or whatever, or rant about how much you hate the Inquisition or anything like that. I don't mind. Any little bit of tidbit or information is greatly appreciated. And on another note, I wanted to we'll have a little break, and we shall return right after this. Okay, and so now we're back. We're back with more SkaredCast. This is Skari, of course. You're listening to SkaredCast, your hub for the tabletop experience. And we were looking at warlord traits. And now we're going to talk a little bit of... Well, I have a couple of shout-outs to do. I wanted to do a quick shout-out to Anubis242. Thank you so much for putting a iTunes review on iTunes for me. and to Logan's daddy, who's down from Niagara region in Ontario. Thank you so much for putting an iTunes review on iTunes. The call out that I have done for everybody still stands. If you would like to leave an iTunes review, because it would really help the podcast out, considering I'm entering my 3rd year of podcasting. If you'd like to help the podcast out, leave an iTunes review, like the Facebook page, and anybody who does leave an iTunes review is actually getting a series of shoutouts. 5 shoutouts on different podcasts, to be exact. And you can tell me if you want me to, do a shout out to your painting like service or your blog or whatever it is you want, and I will do that for you. Just shoot me an email once you put up the iTunes review and let me know if you'd like to have a personalized shout out on the podcast. Get yourself out there, get your name out there. And thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. You guys help the podcast out a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the Berry Brawl. It's a tournament that I ran yesterday at the Gamers Lair in Barrie, Ontario, Canada. It was the inaugural 40k tournament for the game store. We had 8 players playing 1,500 points of 40k in a friendly, competitive environment. And we had 2 guys from out of town, down from Toronto, come up to play, which was fantastic. It was awesome. I really like it when non-locals come to events that I run, just to kind of spice things up and really give the locals a run for their money. Well, the Eternal Warriors were represented by Jason and Tim and Fred, and everybody was had a blast. Thank you guys so much for coming out. 4-round event. Couple of things that, administrative wise, I'm going to be making sure that we change, like some of the wording on some of the result sheets and stuff, just for the Berry Brawl, which is coming in February, which is a lot bigger of a tournament. So I like being able to troubleshoot at smaller events like this in order to make sure that things run smoothly when you're running a larger style RTT event. So, a couple of highlights. We really liked the mission format. We did the Frontline Gaming's like Bay Area open style format with 2 missions running simultaneously, and they were actually a really big success. Absolutely fantastic. It's very simple because it's you're not adding any extra different ways to win a mission or any crazy objectives or anything like that. You're literally just playing 2 book missions simultaneously, and one just happens to be more important than the other, but they're both relatively equally weighed in points. Well, not equally, but if you're horrible at, say, getting kill points, it's a primary, and secondary is crusade, you can actually try and, say, at worst tie the primary and then try and win the secondary in order to kind of pull ahead in terms of the points when it comes to the battle points at the end of the day, and it proved to be really successful. Everybody really liked it, so that's something that's staying. Congratulations to Tim, who won the event with best overall. Beautifully painted Eldar, a Latok style Eldar with a Jet Seer Council, and may I say, holy moly, is that a nasty army. I had the pleasure of playing it round 1 with my Seize the Initiative Vect list and Kotiaz, just because I was playing as a ringer for the day, and it was fun. I was, of course, successfully seized on him and put his Seer Council through the ringer, killing almost the entire Seer Council in 1 volley. But then once that 2++ rollable save came up, there was just nothing else I could do, and he came back from assured defeat to win the game at the end of the game to take points back considering I was unable to stop the Baron and the 2 Farseers and just the 2 Warlocks that were left from taking the game. So what I learned from that is that actually I think I'm going to be taking a pointer from Reese from Frontline Gaming, and maybe implementing the any 2++ rerollable will actually be a 2+, 4+. I think that would actually mean that it's still hard to destroy a unit like that, but it's not going to be something that somebody can kind of put all their eggs in when they're designing a list. And I'm really hoping that that might kind of switch things up a little bit. I'm also really considering allowing Lords of War into the berry bash. Now, there's been a lot of controversy in terms of Lords of War, their effect on the game, whether or not they should be legal. The way GW's kind of gone by it is just, if we make it, you can use it kind of thing. Which, I get it, they're a company that wants to sell miniatures. And honestly, I'm okay with a lot of that trail of thought, in the sense that, if you're an orc player and you have a little, say, army of orcs, and you thought the Stomper looked cool, and so you bought a Stomper, and you have never been able to use your Stomper because you just don't have a gaming group that's large enough that has, so you can't really play Apocalypse. So really, your Stomper's just sitting there, gathering dust, on your shelf, and nobody likes playing it, or nobody wants to play Apocalypse, so you'll never get to use it. Honestly, I think that's just a waste of a model. And I feel that a lot can be gained from adding big things like Titans into regular 40k. I used to play against my brother all the time. This was back in the day, before Forge World was widely accepted, and he'd run his Baneblade, and I'd try to kill the Baneblade, because that's pretty much what it was. And we played 1500 points, so we knew that the Baneblade was a huge chunk of points when it came to that point value, and you needed to either be really good at dodging the Baneblade with line of sight blocking terrain, or just killing the Baneblade with drop pod melter guns or something. So I think that there's ways to deal with it. The biggest thing I have is, if I'm going to be FAQing and errating the 2+ rerollable to a 2+, 4+, which means that would kind of, tone down the Screamer Star and tone down the Jetseer Star a little bit, you're looking at not needing things like D-weapons to just completely destroy units. And it's not that I don't think I personally can't handle D-weapons. I think that it's not a big deal, but other people do have a big issue with it. The biggest thing I believe would be an issue was just going to be the fact that D-weapons kind of ignore some of the core mechanics of the game, such as being able to roll to see if you save yourself, or roll to see if, that just damage doesn't happen. So if I errata the one thing, I think I'm going to errata D-weapons to be Strength 10, AP 1, Armor Bane, Flesh Bane, Ignore Cover. So you can still take invulnerable saves off it, but it's going to be it's going to destroy vehicles more often than not with the AP 1, and will be more likely to do damage to things like super heavies and whatnot. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts on that specifically, and which really brings me to the end of the podcast. As a little recap, talked about warlord traits, talked about the berry brawl and kind of how that worked and what we liked, and a couple of competitive thoughts, as well as a couple of shout-outs. So, thanks a lot for tuning in to your weekly podcast here at SkaredCast. Make sure you drop me a line, like us on Facebook, or leave an iTunes review, as it helps the podcast out a lot. Thanks a lot for tuning in. This is Skari. You guys make this possible, and I really appreciate your feedback. Skari,